No, this is handmade?
What?
No. Look how far the light at the end of the tunnel. It's like it's on my road. I don't like this shit.
Seriously, man.
This is dangerous, like seriously.
Ew, look at that animal.
Look how long he's talking.
Yo, what the fuck? Why is this one locked?
Wait. What's it that stuff? We won't know till later. Find out later. Battery on there?
Wait. No, I turned it off with my finger before.
I like this real
Yo, guys, don't fucking leave me. Dan, come here, Dan. Wait, Brian, I wanna get this. Cages.
What's that little thing? Let's go back there.
Look out, let's see it right there.
What's in that hole? I'll go back.
Yo, what are these things for?
Doors locked.
Yeah, dude, they locked, huh?
That's completely sealed off.
And
Is that downstairs? No, it's sealed off. There's gotta be one place that's not sealed off.
you never know, man.
At the farthest edge of Long Island, where the road narrows, the ocean surrounds you, and the land feels like it simply gives up, there is a place that looks harmless enough, a state park with open fields, concrete ruins, and a massive radar tower frozen in time, a place where families walk their dogs and children run freely without knowing that for decades this land did not exist on public maps. A place called Camp Hero, officially a Cold War military installation, unofficially something far more troubling depending on who you listen to. And the reason this place refuses to fade into obscurity is not because of what we can prove happened here, but because of what history has taught us is possible when secrecy becomes policy. In 1997, a sitting U.S. president stood before the nation and apologized for secret government experiments conducted on American citizens. Experiments that took place in hospitals, universities, and military bases. Experiments that were hidden, denied, and later partially erased. And what he did not say that day was where all of them happened, how many records were destroyed, or how many stories never made it into the official apology. And once you understand that, places like Camp Hero stop feeling random and start feeling familiar. Long before Netflix, long before social media, long before conspiracy culture became entertainment, the creators of Stranger Things were developing a show under a different name, Montauk, inspired by stories they encountered about this exact location. And while inspiration does not equal truth, it does mean that the legend already existed, circulating quietly, passed between locals, researchers, and people who claimed they remembered things they were never supposed to remember. The Montauk Project, as it is now called, is widely dismissed as a conspiracy theory, a modern myth built on unreliable witnesses and science fiction concepts like time travel and interdimensional portals. And on the surface, that dismissal makes sense because there are no official documents, no photographs, no confirmed staff lists, and no physical evidence that supports the more extreme claims. But the absence of evidence is not always accidental, especially when history has shown us repeatedly that evidence is often the first thing destroyed. The modern Montauk story begins in 1992, when a man named Preston Nichols published a book claiming he had worked at Camp Hero for years without remembering it, that his memories were deliberately erased and only returned later in fragments, through dreams, emotional breakdowns, and sudden flashes of recognition. A claim that immediately raises skepticism, because recovered memories are notoriously unreliable and can be shaped, exaggerated, or entirely fabricated, something Nichols himself was aware of. Yet he insisted that what he remembered aligned too closely with the physical layout of the base to be coincidence. Underground rooms, electronics labs, equipment that should not have existed there. And he claimed the project spanned decades and involved experiments that pushed far beyond psychology into something closer to human engineering. Nichols was not alone for long because others came forward, including Al Bielek, whose claims pushed the story from disturbing into almost impossible, as he insisted that his involvement with Montauk was tied to the infamous Philadelphia experiment of 1943, a naval legend in which the U.S. military allegedly attempted to make a ship invisible, a story the Navy denies and historians dismiss. Yet, Bielek claimed the experiment fractured time itself, and that the technology resurfaced decades later at Camp Hero, creating a temporal loop between 1943 and 1983, allowing people, information, and events to bleed across decades. And according to him, this was not theoretical, because he claimed to have lived it. This is where belief collapses for most people, and reasonably so, because there is no evidence that time travel was achieved, no proof that John von Neumann, a brilliant mathematician officially dead since 1957, survived to work on Montauk experiments as Bielek claimed, and no scientific framework that supports these ideas. But dismissing the story entirely becomes harder when you remember that the US government has openly admitted to running illegal human experiments under programs like MKUltra, where civilians were drugged without consent, psychologically tortured, subjected to hypnosis, sensory deprivation, and behavioral conditioning, often with records destroyed and victims ignored. And once you accept that reality, Montauk stops sounding like pure fantasy and starts sounding like an exaggerated echo of something real. According to witnesses, the Montauk Project focused heavily on mind control, particularly involving children. Not because of mysticism, but because of neurology, because young minds are more adaptable, more vulnerable, easier to fracture and reshape. And they claim that runaway boys and homeless children were targeted precisely because they would not be missed, a claim for which there is no proof at Montauk, but one that mirrors real, documented logic used in other unethical experiments throughout history. Witnesses described extreme psychological stress designed to break identity, isolation, fear conditioning, physical pain, not as punishment but as method. And once the mind was broken, it could be programmed. Language that sounds extreme but mirrors real psychological warfare theory. And at the center of these claims was a device known as the Montauk chair, described as a metal chair wired into amplifiers, antennas, and repurposed radar equipment, where a subject's brainwaves could be monitored and amplified, allegedly allowing thought to influence reality itself. A claim that violates known physics, yet feels uncomfortably adjacent to modern brain-computer interface research openly pursued today. From there, the story descends fully into nightmare, with claims of a time tunnel opened through the chair, portals that allowed access to other times, other spaces, even non-human intelligence. And according to the most extreme accounts, something came through that could not be controlled. A creature that destroyed equipment, killed researchers, and forced an emergency shutdown of the project in August of 1983, followed by mass memory erasure, destruction of records, and the permanent sealing of the base, a narrative so convenient it almost collapses under its own weight. In reality, Camp Hero was decommissioned in the early 1980s for official reasons involving obsolescence and environmental concerns. Later investigated for fuel contamination with no evidence of underground megastructures or advanced laboratories. And yet visitors still report sealed tunnels, welded doors, restricted areas, and an unease that has nothing to do with monsters and everything to do with silence. The Montauk Project is almost certainly not a literal story of time travel, portals, or creatures, and the witnesses are unreliable, the claims contradictory, and the science unsupported. But dismissing it as harmless fiction ignores something far more unsettling, because history shows that when governments operate in secrecy, the truth rarely emerges cleanly. It leaks, distorts, mutates into stories that sound insane because the reality beneath them was never allowed into the light. And Montauk may not have been a gateway through time, but it may have been something far more believable and far more disturbing. A place where ethics were suspended, where secrecy justified cruelty, where human beings became variables. And if that is true, then the most frightening part of the Montauk Project is not what people claim happened there, but how easily we accept that whatever did happen was buried well enough that we will never be sure it didn't.